On July 25th, 1991, Michael Landon died at the age of 54, leaving behind a silence that felt unusually personal for millions of Americans. Not long before his death, he stood before the nation and spoke with calm honesty about his illness, refusing pity or denial. That moment froze the public because Landon was not just a television star. He was a familiar presence woven into family routines for decades. Through Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, and Highway to Heaven, he had embodied fathers, protectors, and moral guides. His passing felt less like the loss of an actor and more like the disappearance of someone who had quietly shaped values inside living rooms across the country. Yet the man behind those comforting stories was far more complex than the image suggested. His strength was not effortless. It was constructed over a lifetime marked by instability, pressure, and a relentless drive to stay in control. To understand how he faced death with such steadiness, one must look far beyond fame, into the foundations that shaped him long before America knew his name. A childhood built without safety, Michael Landon was born Eugene Morris Orowitz in 1936, into a household defined by emotional volatility rather than security. Growing up, he experienced an atmosphere where tension was common and stability uncertain. His father struggled professionally and emotionally, while his mother carried unfulfilled ambitions that often spilled into the home. For a child, this meant learning early how to stay alert, quiet, and self-contained. School offered little relief, as he frequently felt like an outsider, developing resilience not through comfort but necessity. Rather than breaking him, these experiences forged a deep inner resolve. Silence became protection, imagination became refuge, and control became survival. Landon learned to depend on himself long before adulthood demanded it. Even as a boy, he began shaping an internal version of strength that did not rely on reassurance from others. This early environment did not crush his spirit, but it did teach him a lesson that followed him for life. If stability was to exist, he would have to build it himself, brick by brick, without expecting rescue. Discipline as a way out. Sports became Michael Landon's first structured escape from emotional uncertainty. In javelin throwing, he found clarity. Effort produced results, and outcomes were measurable rather than emotional. His dedication earned him a scholarship to the University of Southern California, a milestone that represented independence more than prestige. Yet even there, pressure followed him. Injuries ended his athletic ambitions abruptly, closing a future he had counted on. Without a safety net, Landon entered the workforce, taking physically demanding jobs that offered little recognition but demanded consistency. These years quietly shaped him. Factory shifts, manual labor, and routine work reinforced habits of discipline, endurance, and responsibility. He learned that showing up mattered even when no one was watching. Acting entered his life almost accidentally, not as a dream, but as another opportunity to move forward. What drew him in was control, the ability to step into a moment and shape it. Slowly, deliberately, he began rebuilding himself, choosing persistence over promise and work ethic over luck. Becoming Michael Landon. Choosing the name Michael Landon was not a cosmetic change, but a psychological one. It marked a clean division between the past he survived and the future he intended to construct. Early acting years were filled with rejection, brief appearances, and long stretches of uncertainty. Yet Landon treated each setback as familiar territory. He had endured worse. His breakthrough came with I Was a Teenage Werewolf, a modest film that unexpectedly showcased his ability to express inner conflict with restraint. Soon after, Bonanza transformed his life. As Little Joe Cartwright, Landon became a weekly presence in American homes, projecting energy, loyalty, and emotional immediacy. The show's success gave him visibility, but it also gave him responsibility. Fame arrived just as personal loss struck, reinforcing his belief that security was never permanent. Rather than loosening his grip, success tightened it. Landon worked harder, controlled more, and began to understand that creative authority might be the only form of safety he truly trusted. Power, control, and creative authority. As his career matured, Michael Landon moved behind the camera, not out of ego, but necessity. Writing, directing, and producing allowed him to protect the moral structure of his stories. On Little House on the Prairie, he became the central creative force, shaping tone, pacing, and values with precision. The series thrived because of that consistency. Landon believed stories should offer guidance without preaching and emotion without spectacle. He ran sets that balanced warmth with firm boundaries, especially where children were involved. Yet control came at a cost. Disagreements emerged, relationships strained, and expectations remained high. Off-screen, his personal life did not always reflect the harmony he portrayed. Decisions he made caused pain, particularly within his family, and those fractures became impossible to hide. The public struggled to reconcile the moral clarity of his work with the imperfections of his life. For Landon, the tension was deeply personal. He was not playing a role, he was trying, imperfectly, to live up to the standards he believed in. Love, family, and repeating patterns. Michael Landon's personal relationships reflected the same urgency that defined his work. He longed for family as a place of refuge, yet struggled to remain still within it. His marriages unfolded alongside career growth, each shaped by different expectations and pressures. As success expanded, time at home diminished, responsibilities multiplied, while emotional distance quietly grew. Landon was generous, committed, and deeply attached to his children, but also driven by a fear of losing momentum. When relationships ended, they left lasting wounds, not only for him, but for those around him. These were not failures born of indifference, but of imbalance. He gave intensely, yet often through action rather than presence. Later in life, he sought to correct earlier mistakes, building a quieter domestic rhythm and prioritizing daily connection. Still, unresolved pain lingered. His story reminds us that good intentions do not prevent hurt, and that even those who teach family values publicly may struggle to practice them privately, especially when driven by unresolved fear. A changing television landscape with Highway to Heaven, Landon shifted tone rather than retreating. The series explored faith, dignity, and second chances through simple encounters rather than nostalgia. Audiences responded, but the industry was changing. Television moved toward faster pacing and sharper edges, while Landon remained committed to gentler storytelling. Loss struck again with the death of close collaborators, reinforcing his awareness of time's fragility. The show gradually became quieter, more reflective, and less aligned with mainstream trends. Landon did not adapt by chasing relevance. Instead, he stayed consistent with his values. When the series ended, it marked not a failure, but a closing chapter. He had said what he wanted to say, in the way he believed it should be said. His refusal to compromise tone for popularity preserved the integrity of his work, even as it narrowed its audience. In hindsight, this period reveals Landon not as outdated, but as steadfast, someone unwilling to abandon compassion in an increasingly noisy medium. Facing the end with clarity, when Michael Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1991, he chose openness over retreat. He spoke publicly with composure, acknowledging uncertainty without dramatizing it. Treatment was difficult, and decline came quickly, yet he remained focused on making his own decisions. Time narrowed, family moments became central, misunderstandings created painful gaps, but love remained present in quieter forms. In his final days, conversations were simple and unadorned. There was no performance left to give, only presence. Landon's death prompted a national response not rooted in spectacle, but recognition. Viewers grieved someone who had accompanied them through decades of ordinary evenings. Tributes emphasized not perfection, but sincerity. Those who knew him best spoke of contradictions held together by genuine care. His final message echoed the discipline that shaped his life: acceptance without denial. He did not promise victory, he promised honesty. In doing so, he left with the same dignity that had defined his strongest work. The legacy that still speaks, Michael Landon's legacy, endures not because he was flawless, but because he told stories that trusted audiences to feel deeply. His work treated morality as lived experience rather than abstract lesson. Through families, wanderers, and communities, he explored loss, responsibility, forgiveness, and choice. He believed people could stumble without being discarded. In a medium often driven by spectacle, he insisted on sincerity. That approach shaped generations of family television and still resonates in reruns watched across the world. Landon proved that mass audiences could be moved without cruelty, that compassion could coexist with discipline, and that stories could heal without denying pain. His life mirrored those themes, marked by effort, contradiction, and growth. What remains is not a polished symbol, but a human legacy, one that quietly asks viewers to reflect on their own choices, their own families, and what values they choose to protect when life becomes difficult. That question, more than any role he played, is why Michael Landon is still remembered.